Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Beat the Clock podcast. My name is Michelle Rubio-Garcia, and I am here to help you grow. Through the many timed interviews I'll be having, all guests will answer 4 time-specific questions. By answering these questions honestly, we hope to show you how each moment connects to the next. Whether they are entrepreneurs or thought leaders, all are invited to sit down, chat with me, and show you a realistic depiction of success. By doing so, we hope to change your mind and empower you to beat the clock. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Beat the Clock. I'm Michelle, and I want to personally say that I super appreciate that my voice is taking up any space in your life. I do not take that lightly, so thank you so much for taking some time to welcome me in, but also to really nurture your soul. I get people from all walks of life to really just elaborate on their stories. Usually a lot of them are from unconventional paths, and they're the dreamers, but the dreamers that go out and do something about it. So if you want to hang around those people, but they're not immediately available to you, I created this. And that way you can have all the wisdom, all the knowledge, all the inspiration that they provide. And so at the beginning of every BTC episode, we like to start off with the BTC affirmations. They are the same 3 that we always start off with. And if you know them, that's great. You know the drill. If you don't, follow along with me, breathe, and just kind of relax. I'll coach you through it. No problem. Number 1, I trust myself. So even if it feels like you have no control over your situation, you can reverse it or pivot. Number 2, my time is valuable. You are not some random victim, and you are not someone who can be played with. And finally, number 3, I can control how I use my time today. So like the other 2 mentioned, you have so much power that you're not tapping into. And all you got to do is really work with your time to kind of create the environment or life that you want. And so today's guest is someone with such an extensive background. It's going to be really hard to kind of squeeze it in. So I'm going to go ahead and already try. Dan Chan, Master Magician, is an internationally renowned, award-winning magician whose magic has taken him all over the world. Based in the San Francisco Bay Area, Dan is regarded as one of the nation's top corporate magicians and performs at events for thought leaders and influencers worldwide. Dan Chan provides the ultimate entertainment experience because he promises more than expected and delivers more than hoped. Chan's act has been called the perfect entertainment solution for savvy corporate audiences and sophisticated magic for intelligent audiences. With 20 years of full-time experience under his belt, find out for yourself why the 49ers, Airbnb, I can't even say all this, so I'm just going to pick Bank of America, Facebook, Oracle, Radio Disney, Shutterfly, Twitter, the government, Visa, Wells Fargo, Yahoo. I mean, just an incredible portfolio that is reflective of a man who will do what others won't so he can have success that others can't. He didn't even do magic, and I felt so blown away by him. So if you kind of, in the past have poked around episodes but not really gotten through a whole one, or maybe, you're distracted when you listen to BTC, please remove all distractions and listen to the magic of Dan Chan's life, because even aside from his shows, he just has a way of thinking and working that will really, really motivate you and get you out of complacency. So yeah, I feel like you'll definitely know what I mean by the end. Let's see how he beats the clock. Go. And the timer starts now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to BTC. I have Dan Chan, Master Magician, here with us today. Hi, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Michelle.
Yes, thank you so much for the speedy response. When I was looking at everything you've been doing lately, it's like, wow, I can't believe that we have somebody like you on here. It's exactly what we need in BTC to kind of show people how to dream and how to aim for really cool things. So I'm super, super fortunate to have you on here.
Thank you.
And so before every single chat that we have, I like to talk to each person and kind of get to the root of their personality or who they are as a person, their purpose. So yes, you are a master magician, but who are you if you strip that label away? And so to me, Dan, you're a suspender of reality. Obviously through your magic tricks, of course, but also through a lifestyle choice, right? You suspend the ideas of conventional work, and you suspend even the idea of pivoting in a career in the middle of a pandemic, right? People are so scared to just take a tiny step out of their comfort zone during this thing. And with something like magic, you would never think that you would be able to kind of pivot the way you have and successfully. So what would you say about that little descriptor? Is it accurate?
Absolutely. Before the pandemic, I was doing 5,000 plus shows over the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since the pandemic's gone through, I've done well over 100 shows for companies like Netflix and Google. But who was I in the past? Is that what you wanted to know now?
No, we haven't started that yet. So I'm just telling you who I think you are. So I think for you, when I promote this and everything, you're going to be like a suspender of reality because you get to do that through your shows, but you also get to do that just by the life that you're living. And you get to kind of show everybody that there's another version of reality out there if they're just willing to kind of work through it and find their calling. So people tend to like that. And I don't know if you do, but I really do think you give people a lot of hope with your work.
Absolutely. I think that um, just being able to pursue your dreams sets you up as a role model and an example.
Yeah, and that you are. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. I am going to time the first question. So who were you before you were the master magician? What led up to this? I read that you were previously in the U.S. Coastal Guard Reserves and that you worked for PayPal. Is that correct?
That's correct. But even before that, I grew up in San Francisco, went to school at Zion, then Lowell. Then a lot of what I did was connected to the water. I was a assistant swim instructor aide.
Mm-hmm.
Then I swam competitively in high school, which led to me also doing some swimming related stuff in college, being a lifeguard,
Mm-hmm.
then a water safety instructor. I then learned scuba. And from there, I went into teaching sailing and windsurfing, and I worked at a lot of summer camps. And that kind of led into the magic, which
Wow.
was another period of my life.
And how did it lead into that? Because it seems kind of like they're on opposite ends of a spectrum, something, you know, very practical versus something that's very magical. So how did that happen?
They're both fun jobs. So that's the most important thing, is to always have fun. There's certain times you have to do things that are not as fun or not as sexy, but you want to have fun during your life, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to do things that are engaging. So when I pivoted, I learned at a summer camp called Gold Arrow Camp how to do the Chinese yo-yo. And I kind of got interested in that juggling and magic at that one career, or that one point in time in my career.
And how old were you then?
In college, I picked up the Diablo. I learned how to juggle, and then I think around that time, I also, shortly after I came home, I went to the fire juggle.
So, wow. So it was
3, 4, and 5 balls.
It was water, juggling, then magic. That was the trajectory?
Yeah, kind of like that.
Cool. And how did everybody around you respond to this kind of pivot?
You know, with Asian families, they can be a little bit judgmental, mm-hmm. but as long as you're not asking them for money, they're very supportive of you. You know, your parents want you to do well. They want you to live life to the fullest, but the biggest concern is financial.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And were you able to cover your finances doing that kind of work?
Absolutely. I mean, I lived at home, so that was pretty easy. Mm-hmm. So I had what we call a runway. And when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, you want to have a runway where you can actually get that plane to take off. Mm-hmm. You need a certain velocity. And the way that I talk to entrepreneurs and I coach them is you want to think about what your end goal is. Let's say your end goal is $52,000 a year. When I started talking to magicians, they were making $250 a show for kid shows.
Mm-hmm.
So if I did 4 shows in a week times $250, that's $1,000 a week, 52 weeks in the year. Average, I need 4 shows at that rate. If I doubled that, I would make 100,000.
Yeah, and I love that you're bringing that up because a lot of people think that these kind of goals are very like outlandish, but it really is a numbers game. And when you consider how many people are going to want entertainment or how many people are going to want your product or service, it definitely boils down to math and kind of casting a wide net. So you did do those kind of kid shows initially before you obviously became the billionaire magician.
Yeah, well, that was at least 10 years of my life where I started off with birthday parties, libraries, and schools.
Cool.
Now I'll just book out other people, maybe my son or some other team members, when there's a birthday party or some other event that comes in at that price point.
And
It's
so
all about scaling.
as you're perfecting your craft, was there ever some sort of imposter syndrome that you were experiencing or some sort of nerves that you weren't going to be able to meet the audience's expectations?
And not so much imposter syndrome, because I hear about that with entrepreneurs,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more like comparing myself to the best in every category. Like if I'm doing magic, juggling, and pickpocketing, you can't be the world's best juggler because they're spending so much time. It takes a physical amount of energy. So I had to say to myself, I want to be the best at all of those in the area that I'm living.
Okay, so like
Versus I'm
regional
going to
or
yeah, you have to define what success is for you. Like when I was pole vaulting, I also pole vaulted and swam. So if I did both, you're going to have diminished returns. But for me, that was satisfactory because I didn't want to just do be defined by one thing. Because a lot of people are defined by one thing, and when they don't have it, then they go into this depression.
exactly. And that's the richness I'm finding in this season of my life because I used to kind of really hone in. I used to be a dance coach and then I teach currently, but the goal is to open this up to whatever it's going to be. So I'm doing a podcast. I've written a book. I'm going to open up a coaching/consulting business. I'm not allowing myself to really root my identity in one thing because like you're saying, when you lose that one thing, it's like your whole world essentially comes to a grinding halt. So I really like that you bring that up. I have another question. And so I loved on your website, and I don't know if anyone's ever asked you this, but I love that you put a Bible verse at the end, at the bottom. And so for me, I'm a Christian, so a lot of people sometimes can look at something like magic as something deceptive or evil. So how do you balance that kind of philosophy and devote so much time to something that maybe some people don't immediately equate with faith?
Yeah, well, Joseph in the Bible was a magician, they said, or like he was a wise person. And then
Mm-hmm.
Daniel in the Bible was the chief of magicians, if you look at some translations. So that just meant knowledge that other people didn't have. So there's different types of ways to define magic, and I don't think that it was defined as sorcery or witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
But they could have been done different. The definitions throughout time change. So you have to look at what the context you're looking at.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I love magic, but when I saw that, I was like, wow, there's like a real spiritual element maybe to what he's doing, and he takes that to heart enough to put it on a website. So I just wanted to make that very clear for other people because maybe they're not going to see it the way you're describing it. And you're right, words, their meanings change and their connotations change. So I really like that, and I honestly didn't know that some of those biblical figures were magicians. So that's pretty cool.
yeah.
So we have about a minute and a half left. So is there anything that you want to do or say about who you were before we jump into what you're doing now?
No, yeah, I just Coast Guard reservist, and that was water in the beginning of my career, and then we ended up to where we're at now.
Awesome. So you beat this question, no problem. So now we're jumping into question number 2. And so the question is, who are you now? So we know that you are a magician. So, and you mentioned a little bit of it. So you were doing 5,000 shows before, and now you've had to pivot. So what has this been like for you right now?
Yeah, I am now a virtual magician.
Mm-hmm.
Over Zoom, I've performed, as I said before, over 100 shows. CNBC featured me. Then The Hustle featured me, and I got into 2 million inboxes. followed by twice in Business Insider since the beginning of this pandemic. So I am a father, a proud father. My son was just on national television twice, once in December last year with Tiffany Haddish's Kids Say the Darndest Thing. He was performing a large major illusion. You can see that on our website, danchanmagic.com. My son was also on Access Insider with Penn and Teller, performing for the Penn and Teller. So my wife is a beautiful lady who is a balloon artist, and my daughter, Amazing Grace, she also participates in the show as well. So.
That's so cool. That was actually one of my questions, if there's like this legacy of entertainment in your family. And so we didn't do it at the beginning, but we can do it now. Where can people find all this information in one place? Your website, your handles, all that?
Yeah, I'm at danchanmagic.com. I'm also at danchanmagic on Instagram. And if you just search on Facebook, Dan Chan Billionaires Magician, I'm on Facebook as Dan Chan Billionaires Magician.
Cool. And so that was another question I had too, because you're mentioning a lot of the press coverage. So I wanted to ask which was more satisfying. Is the press coverage really validating and satisfying because it legitimizes magic, or is it better to just really get the satisfaction of feeling like you get to do what you love every single day? Which one's better?
You can't compare it. It's like apples and oranges. I love what I'm doing. Sometimes it becomes a chore and you have to go through those reps. You can't not avoid the reps. Some people say, oh, we're going to be good just by going out there and doing it, or once or twice. I've had people just think that it's going to be a lot easier than it is. You have to go through those reps, whether it's practicing and also being on stage for a lot of times.
And so what are some adjustments you've had to make? If you got used to doing reps in a physical way, how do you do your reps virtually? Is it the same thing? Because I know for a while I read in one of your articles, I think it was the Business Insider, you were saying that Facebook magic doesn't work. Magic only works through Zoom. So how long did it take for you to figure that out? How long did it take for you to adjust the show? All that good stuff.
The reason why it doesn't work on Facebook is we streamed it to Facebook and there's like a 30-second lag. I think it was a 22-second exact lag or something like that. So if I'm asking you a question through the chat and you respond back a lot later, it just drags on. So you're done. So that's the reason why I said it doesn't work, because we tried it once. And once you quickly realize it, you can start streaming to there, but those people are not active participants versus being engaged in the show, especially if you're paying top dollar for virtual experience for businesses. They want to be fully engaged.
Would you say that you're the most successful virtual magician right now?
I'm one of the pioneers. I'm probably within the top 10. I would say definitely top 10, I think.
And how do you feel about that?
It's very satisfying because you just realize that this is a global platform. I've performed for audiences in Singapore, Canada, Australia. We've had performed for congressmen, Netflix 3 times, Google probably 4 or 5 times. So it's great to be associated with all these global brands.
And now at this bigger stage, do you still get nervous, or it's just like clockwork at this point?
Not nervous, sometimes disappointed in the result, because I sometimes feel like I'm hitting 80% when I can get to 100%. And I'm doing so much. Let's just say like 2 Thursdays ago, I did 5 shows on one day. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. for the first show. My last show started maybe, I think 7 p.m. So sometimes when you crank out so much volume, you're disappointed that you're not giving it your all sometimes.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know that the audience picks up on that. I know definitely coming from like a performing arts standpoint, when I felt like I just whipped out a routine for my team, nobody else sees it, but us as the performers or the creators, whatever you want to call it, we feel that disappointment, but we can't let it get to us, right? I feel like people feel that immediate tinge of disappointment and they feel like everything's a lost cause and their work doesn't matter. But how do you pump yourself up for the next show when you feel those moments of disappointment?
A little bit more practice. Sometimes I realize that if you're doing volume, you can't do as much quality. So I try to focus more on quality whenever possible. But sometimes opportunity comes through and you see an event and it pays really well. Just have to take the next event and just grind through because yeah, I look at it this way. I'm always from a business point, someone's paying me $500 or $1,000 for a show. I think, boy, I can, go out to eat or do a lot with that $500.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes it's like a lot more than that. Then I'm just doing that as a rep. You get through 80% and you're just there, but it is what it is.
I love that you're saying that because people think that magic can always be really exciting, but just like any career, you as the expert in the field, you're gonna feel those seasons, right, where you're not as into it, but it's okay. I feel like a lot of people too, when they feel that lack of passion, they automatically assume they lost it and they pivot, and like maybe at the wrong time. You know when to pivot, you know how to pivot, and it's really, really admirable to do it in such a quote unquote risky profession.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, "Oh, was it risky to pivot?" And I was like, I was already making a lot of money doing magic as a side hustle on the weekends when I left PayPal.
Mm.
So it wasn't that big a risk. The biggest risk was not cashing out on the rest of the stock options, which I got. Like I cashed out on 13 months of stock options. And the
Wow.
risk was the upside. So I did miss out on a significant upside.
Wow. And do you ever have seasons or pockets where you have like a slower show base?
I am, yeah, you do have some seasons that are a little bit slower, and you just modify what you're doing. Like if I'm not working on a specific date, I'm going to pitch LinkedIn, meet people, go on Facebook, and jump on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Those are like today. I only had one show for Netflix today.
Mm-hmm.
I performed for the next Netflix crew in this SoCal, not SoCal, but the computer team out here. Probably they're in the Bay Area.
Cool. And so basically you don't devote any of your time to non-magic related things. It's just all magic at this point, correct?
I have a couple of side hobbies, like I'll spearfish in a couple of weeks. I'm gonna try lobster hunting again in a couple of weeks. So
So
that's gonna
back
be
to the
pretty fun.
water.
Back to the water. That's really what refreshes me.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, we're moving on nicely. I don't want to ask any more because then I think we go over time. Question number 3. So who will you be in the future? Are you going to stay virtual or are you going to plan to go back offline? What's the plan here?
You just have to look at what the opportunity brings, because I plan on continuing to do these virtual shows because just in terms of the analysis is if I do a physical show, I have to drive somewhere. It usually takes an hour. I have to show up half an hour early to be even comfortable with traffic. Then I have to drive an hour back, and sometimes I give a little extra time. Here, it's just like in and out. I could just put my shirt on, have this beautiful backdrop behind me. So it's going to be, I want to not let that skill set disappear, because if you stop doing something for a long time, you're going to be rusty at live. So I'm going to try to do maybe one a month or two a month, but I can see if there's that demand, and if I'll see where I'm making more in terms of per hour, because I think I really sacrificed a lot to be in this position. Because I remember when my grandmother, I think, turned not 80 or 90 years old, we took 3 shows that day, I think. And then we showed up to her event, and then she asked me to perform. So immediately I like ate one bite and I went to perform for my grandma's birthday party. So I showed up late because I felt that was it was an undue thing that I put on myself, the pressure, because there are certain things that some family members said to me that were detrimental. In the beginning, they said, "Oh, if we were to hire you, you only, like they put no value in what I was doing," and that put me fearful, and that undervalued myself in terms of the way I positioned myself in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So that's who that's part of what I was thinking.
And so when you heard those detrimental comments, how long did it take for you to bounce back and kind of believe in yourself again to the same degree that you did before?
A lot longer. I don't know exactly. It always was in the back of my mind. So
Mm-hmm.
even then sometimes it has a lingering effect, and sometimes we're not conscious of it, or if you start a little bit later pursuing it, I feel like you're at a little bit of a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows? I could have done certain things differently over time, but you have to have no regret.
Right. And I really like that mentality. I feel like that's what's made you fare well in this industry. And so as of now, you're saying you're probably going to stay virtual because of the advantages of that. And was that something you ever would have considered before the pandemic?
No, because industry wasn't there, and we weren't forced to go pivot, because I was doing well, but not well enough that I would consider trying this, because this was a lot of work to pivot, because I had to build the studio in my house that you see behind me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had to think of a whole new show. If I had these escape plans, you actually make excuses not to get there. So
Right.
when you listen to motivational speakers, they always talk about burn the boats behind you.
Mm-hmm.
When they were attacking or conquering, the warriors had no way out because the leaders would burn the boats. So a lot of times when people do this, they still have that escape route. So then they don't work as hard. They're like, oh, let me just be a part-time magician. Oh, if it comes, it comes. If not, and then they're taking what's left, what we call leftovers.
Mm-hmm.
But when you commit fully, I had a family to take care of. So I could have gotten a job for minimum wage, which everyone was still competing for, or I could have just rebuilt my show, which I did. I did shows for free in the beginning, from the beginning of pandemic, charging 50, 100, 300, 500, 750 to even 1500. So I worked my way all the way back up to a level pre-COVID, but I understood the process. I understood selling on the phone. I understood marketing, which made that acceleration a lot smoother. Because I know in the past I did these $1,500 shows and $5,000 shows. I knew that people are willing to do that, and that helped me with my confidence.
Yeah. And I mean, that's so crazy to think that you had to go all the way back down, but you labeled them too as like beta shows, right? Like, so you could work out the kinks.
Yeah, I still have some beta shows occasionally. Like when someone says, "Hey, can we work within a certain budget?" I would say I would do a semi-private event so that other people would join in. I had people like reporters come in to certain shows. I might have a podcaster come in or join a show if they buy a semi-private event, or I would test out new material, because I know that my show is worth X, and then anything below that, I'm just playing around with new things and
And do
things,
you
or
get the same
sandwiching.
level of satisfaction? I get that there's perks involved and you can stay home, but is the reaction of people the same? I mean, when we did it right before in the prep, I was still freaking out. So is it similar or is it a different reaction?
It's a different texture, but just as satisfying. You just have to understand people and their motivations, and understand that you can do so much more on Zoom than you can do live. If you think about the positives, you can do more. But if you focus on the negatives, there's so many things you can't do. Like, I can't have you hold the rubber bands, and if I put something in your hands, it feels a lot stronger when a card changes. I can never do that. But there's other things that you've seen that I want to articulate that you can kind of cheat doing via Zoom.
Yeah. And I really like everything that you've mentioned, because I always say that to people too. They're like, how do I remove negative thoughts, or how do I do this? It's not about removing them, but it's about, you know, not letting them conquer your mind. You're saying we're always going to be able to talk ourselves out of something versus talking ourselves into something. So I think that bleeds really nicely into the last question, unless you want to add something. I did want to ask if you were going to get your family more involved in your shows. Is that something that you're thinking of doing, or are your children wanting to follow in your footsteps and you're willing to kind of nurture that? What's the goal family wise?
Yeah, so he's hit a lot of the goals that we've already planned out. By age 5, he was juggling 3 balls. By age 8, he was juggling 5 balls. By age 10, he was picking pockets and juggling 3 flaming torches. He
Well,
has that as a backup. If he wants to move in this career, it's not going to be a hard transition. I mean, who wouldn't want to crash like a party for some rich billionaire or a celebrity? I've done parties for Paula Abdul. I've done parties where I met Yao Ming. I've done parties for the Warriors, Oakland Athletics, 49ers, SF Giants. So that's pretty epic that you can have your fun hobby job and meet people that it's enviable. It's a really cool job that you can do. So I tell him, you know, when you're done, when you're 18, you could do what you want. I'd hope he still tries to do some of these fun events and we can do some of that together, because I'm going to cherish those times that we spent together as a family. I've taken my daughter and my wife to really epic events.
Yeah,
You know,
so
and those are moments that we share together.
we have about 30 seconds. So if you want to just kind of go ahead and name one person, one event, one sports team, who has been like the highlight performance that you've done your show for?
We did a show for a Google executive, and it was such an epic party. They had a 400-pound Bengal tiger at the event in the backyard in a cage. Plus a whole zoo. They had leopards and alligators or crocodiles. They had bald eagles, penguins, leopards. It was almost everything from A to Z.
Wow.
It was just insane.
Cool. We just beat it right on the money. So I would never think that a tech person would have this kind of thing. And honestly, I don't know if you watch Parks and Rec, but they have an episode where they like glamorize the tiger in a party, and that's like the epitome of like high class luxury. So it's crazy that you can see things that are like
Recs.
Yeah, Parks and
Can
Rec.
you send me the episodes after this?
Yeah,
I would love to see that on YouTube or wherever that's at.
Yeah, it's really quick, but they're like, the highlight of this party is the Bengal tiger. And it's like the symbol of like high class, high ticket, you know, entertainment. So that's really, really cool that you get to experience that, like you're saying, with something that most would just kind of brush off. So the final question that we always like to ask, and this one's typically shorter, so don't feel you need to stretch it into 8 minutes. So how can listeners avoid clocking out? So you've been dropping a lot of little nuggets of wisdom so far, but what is going to be the central little piece of wisdom that you would offer to anybody who wants to do something like you, or something that just seems really, really contrary to what they've been told they have to do in their life? So I'm going to start it right now.
So model success leaves clues, but you have to pay the price. A lot of people want the knowledge that I have, but aren't willing to, you know, make the trips that I've made. Like I've made trips to Shanghai. I've made trips to Las Vegas every year. I have a huge library of magic books and DVDs and props. And, you know, the books itself and DVDs, I've had at one time $100,000 probably worth of books and DVDs. So when people are saying, oh, I want your success, I'm like, and then I offer to sell them a book that I've said will get you there. People say no. I'm like, you're probably not going to get the success that I've had, just to let you know. You know, I hate to break it to you, but there's a price you have to pay. You know, I've done certain things like wake up at 5 a.m. and go to sleep at 2 a.m. And I was pretty much working all that time except for the meals. It might not be as extreme, but on certain times, that's what I did. So you don't have to do that all the time, but you have to pay a price. You know, I don't do that. It's not a daily thing.
Yeah. And when you did those like 5 a.m. to 2 a.m. days, how did you stay awake? Like, how did you muster up the energy the whole time?
I was doing stuff that was so exciting. I think like it was just recently that I was doing those days where I was like pitching reporters and I had shows all the time and I had something to do and there was a deadline. And I was like, I have an opportunity to be on media, so I need to prep for it. And I know that I had so much going on that the next day didn't have enough time for it because you were on a timeline and you wanted to crank out your best work at least.
Yeah. And how did you juggle all of these sacrifices with family? Like, would they travel with you and have those long days too? Or what was the schedule like?
No, they would wake up when they wake up. I mean, we're doing these shows at home. So when they woke up, they'd help me. My wife woke up a couple of times at really early. I woke up probably a little bit earlier, you know, 5:30 a.m. or I woke up 4 a.m. on some of those days. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of stress, but I wouldn't push my kids to wake up that early. But as an adult, you know, you have to be willing to pay that price.
Yeah.
As kids, you want to have a little bit more consistent sleep schedule. You want to have a little bit more of a consistent life. So sometimes if they jump in and do 5 or 10 minutes with a show, it's not going to break them. It's just giving them a rep, because
Right.
people are like, oh, how's this kid so good? I'm like, well, he's been doing it since he was age 4. So he should be halfway good. He's got
Yeah.
more experience than a lot of grown-up magicians. So that's part of doing those reps.
Since age 4 with one of the best, right? Like it's not just anybody either. So, yeah. Do you have anything else you want to add? Otherwise, we can go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah, I'll give you one story.
Sure.
When from age 4 maybe to age 6, my son was arguing with me, and almost once a week he sometimes cry, like because juggling is hard and it's frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
But around age 6, we went to San Francisco. My wife was doing something at the SPCA. They hired her to make balloons. I told my son, just stand there, do your 10 minutes of juggling right there, and afterwards we'll go out, get lunch. I knew it before it happened. I knew people would start tipping him. People started tipping him. I think he made $120 within 2 hours.
Wow.
And I said, you're doing a great job. You can keep all the money that you get. You can save it up for college fund. And he saved it up. And then from that point on, we argued a lot less. And it's the value of money and value of self-worth, because you know that you're providing something that people want. Even if it's standing out there on the street, making people smile. That's not the end goal. People used to think, oh, family would judge us by saying, oh, you're performing out on the street. You need a place to be bad. If you are willing to use that as a stepping stone, it's okay. Some people expect to come out and say, I'm going to do a magic show for $100 or $250 when they haven't even done street shows or practiced enough. Then you're not going to make it, because I'll tell you, when I first started with success, I use that. There's other ways to do it and there's other formulas, but you have to think specifically, what did that person think in their head as they were going through those steps?
Yeah. And basically you're just saying pay your dues, right? And humble yourself and do it when you don't feel it's glamorous and when you don't feel it's really fiscally beneficial, right? Like even if not everybody has the luck of your son to get $100, $200, maybe it's still worth it to kind of get the psychology of your consumer down, right?
It took him 2 years, but he was juggling for almost 2 years, I think, before he went out on the streets to do that. He did some shows, maybe like 3 or 5 minutes in my shows. But I pushed him through that, and then I paid him very little. He's salaried now, but I paid him very little when he was doing the shows because he was just doing 5 minutes.
How old is he?
He's now 12.
And he's salaried already? Wow.
Yeah, he's salaried.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. So I love that story because, again, it's kind of like saying, you have to just do the work. Like, stop making excuses. Stop trying to take shortcuts. Stop trying to jump over hurdles that you're not ready to jump over yet. And just really, I really believe you're just saying own your craft, right? Like, I feel like the Asian culture is so disciplined, and you applied the same discipline that maybe traditional parents want towards medicine or something like that, but you applied it to magic, and it's still just as lucrative, just as powerful. So that's really, really good. That's strong.
Yeah, and there's less competition when you're carving out a path. If you're in entertainment and there's only 5 or 6, it's going to come back to you again. As opposed to, look how many Asian doctors there are. It's like all those doctors want to have fun when they have all this money. They're going to spend it on entertainment. It's just revaluing the priorities and saying, hey, this is an opportunity with less people in it. Why follow the crowd? You carve your own path and then create something new.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of doctors, I can't speak for them, I don't know like 1,000 of them or anything, but whenever I talk to medical staff, they say they much rather do something else, to be honest, and that I've traveled more than them and I'm just a teacher, right? So they say, my job doesn't allow me the flexibility, or like consciously, like if I'm on call, I don't want to go to a vacation and then have to come back and risk that. So you get a lot more mental freedom, I think, than that.
Yes and no, but I think every career, like even for me to pivot careers now, it's like if you're a doctor, you spent 4 years, probably 100,000 a year or whatever that is. Now, if you switch or you take a pause, you're afraid, oh, can I get back in this?
Mm-hmm.
There's like, oh, you'll take a season, but you don't want enough season off until you retire. So that's kind of like, I believe, the mindset, because everyone's like, we've already invested so much. So if
Yeah.
they've invested so much as a doctor, they're not going to have enough time to be the world's best stock picker.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be the next Warren Buffett,
Right.
because they've already have this sunk cost fallacy, is I think I can't make more elsewhere because I'm already making so much. So if that wants to happen, thankfully, if I'm performing at 80%, no one's gonna die. I don't want to be. I don't want to be the doctor who's like performing at 80%. As a
Yeah.
magician, sure, you mess up a trick. It's not a big deal. But as a
Mm-hmm.
doctor, you have someone's life in your hands for the most part, especially if you're in surgery.
Right. Yeah, that's why I didn't get into medicine. I just can't deal with, yeah, life or death. So I want to say, Dan, you are the first person, since I formatted this new timings aspect of it. You're the first one to go 4-0. You beat the clock. How do you feel?
I feel great because we also planned it out. As we said, I reverse engineer success.
Mm-hmm.
So, we talked about this ahead of time. I asked, is it okay to look at the clock?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have a goal in mind. Once you have a goal in mind, you at least have, you at least have some chance of hitting your target. And that's what we
Yeah.
did today. I asked, what are the parameters? Is it cheating if I'm looking at a clock? So we set a clock. And that is exactly what you have to do to achieve that success.
Yeah, for those of you who can't like piece it together. So before in prep, Dan asked me, can I have a timer on my end? I always have the timer on my end and that's it. But he was the first to ask me, can I time it too? And again, it's perfectly stated what he said. If you don't understand the parameters and you don't know how to play the game, or you don't know how to, like, I guess, advocate for yourself in the game, then you won't ever win it in the same fashion that others will. I mean, yeah, you're the first guy. So congratulations. Did you feel really nervous about the time constraint?
Not really. I was like afraid that you asking one or two questions would push me over. So I was like thinking, I didn't want to go too long on some of the questions. I wasn't nervous, but I tell this to my son. Certain times when you read of terms of service,
Mm-hmm.
we might be going over now, like as a afterwards, but we've at least hit our goal. But I tell my son and daughter, you have to read the boring stuff that no one wants to read, because when you look at these companies, like the terms of service for Google or AdWords or anything, they have this boring thing, and a lawyer goes through this. If you want to make that lawyer money, you got to go through that lawyer pain, which means reading stuff that might not be relevant, but they put it there anyways. They cover all their bases. So in any aspect, you have to be willing to do that. Lawyers, prime example, there's certain lawyers that make a lot of money. There's certain lawyers that don't make as much money.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to ask yourself, which types of lawyers are making the money? The ones that are creating deals, mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah.
And, like if you're doing family law or something, there's only so much that, you can sue in a divorce, or you can do so much. So ask yourself those successful questions, and ask, the quality of your questions will determine the quality of your life. You've probably heard that in a lot of podcasts, but ask yourself, what are the constraints and what's your end goal? For me, being on this podcast was to become a better speaker and to network with more people and get to know people. I'm going to connect with you on LinkedIn after today,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll have a quality of relationships doing this one-on-one FaceTime, because our time is our most valuable asset. And I'm really privileged that you would spend some time with me today, Michelle.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, even just you, I know we're already out of the quote unquote challenge, but you're just dropping nuggets that I feel like are going to benefit so many people, because you're a magician and people might think that there's not a lot of planning to that, but you've been the most strategic doing this interview, and everything that you say is very like, there's so much thought, so much strategy, so much calculation, and it just really kind of makes me think that about every kind of career, like even ones we may laugh off, like how much thought is actually going into that. Because I mean, you're top 10 virtual magicians, not by chance, it's by the questions that you're asking. And yes, a lot of people say it in podcasts. I wrote it in my book too. If you're not scared to ask those tough questions, or those questions that people are going to be like, oh, why are you asking that? You're never going to get the kind of answers you're looking for in life. So it's been a true pleasure, Dan. Anything else you want to add? Wow, I'm just like blown away by you.
Yeah, I am online. Just look for me, danchanmagic.com. I also have an Airbnb experiences where you can buy a ticket to see my show. virtually. So wherever you are in this world, come see a magic show. I've seen probably over 25 magic shows virtually and probably over 1,000 magic shows live, because I've actually gone to one lecture almost once a week on average since my beginning of my career. You have to know what you're competing against to know how to rate. Otherwise, you won't even know where you stand with in all these rankings, or at least you can set your own criteria, set your own goals, and not be ignorant of what's out there.
Right. So hone your craft, but don't forget who else is doing it too, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're just too in your zone, then you lose sight of the ecosystem that you're living in. So we're clocking out here, guys. Thank you so much, Dan, for your time, for your attention, for your knowledge. But make sure, guys, that you apply it and you don't clock out in your own. Thank you. And that's it. We're out of it.
Awesome.